And I was walking back to the unit down a very busy road on the Gold Coast, and I got tapped on the shoulder. And I've turned around and I was punched in the face, king hit, obviously knocked out without realizing. And I came to being dragged into the back of a car by my hair. That was when I had this out of body experience, when I left my body. And I was standing outside the car looking in. And I remember laying there. I was laying there, obviously. I don't remember laying down as in the sense of me being laid down, because I obviously had passed out. But I do remember the feeling that everybody was looking over me. So I was laying down and I must have been low on the floor. I don't know. I wasn't high up, I was down low. And then I stood up and thought, why isn't everybody looking at me? So they were still all looking down as I've stood up.
Wow.
And then I've stood up and I've kept on going up.
I want to welcome everybody back to another episode of The Soul Inspired. Today I have Susan Jane with us. She has had multiple experiences spiritually, near-death experiences, or experience and out-of-body experiences. We're going to talk to her about her experiences today. So first of all, Susan, thank you so much for joining The Soul Inspired tonight. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me on. I'm really excited to be here, Joe.
I love sitting down, as we said before we talked. It's my evening time here, and it's my evening interview kind of style. So it's a little more relaxed for me, and I get a little bit more caught into the spiritual this late in the evening. Although I still have a coffee just to keep it's a decaf, but it's to keep me going a little bit. But I usually start anytime I'm talking to anybody, it's just to ask you if you think about when the very first experience was, when that was in your life, who you were before that, and if it shifted you a little bit, like just trying to find out a little bit about who Susan was growing up, who you were as a person, what influences you had.
Oh, okay. So I've got to fess up a little bit, do I? Um,
Yes.
so, so before my experience, I was a little bit of a rebel rouser, I felt. I came from a family with 8 kids. So my 7 brothers and sisters were all there. I did feel like the odd one out, but then when I've spoken to my younger sister, she always felt like the odd one out. So I guess in life we often do feel like we're the odd ones out. So how I would express myself my way, but after my experiences, I did look at things a lot differently. I did open my thoughts and my mind up to other opportunities. Whereas my first experience happened when I was 19. So when I was going through my teenagers and things like that, it was very, very me focused, as most teenagers were or are. And so the biggest change for me wasn't so much the experience, but how I started to look at the world in that context.
Okay, so up until 19 is when the experiences started, but before then, you said maybe a little rebellious, just kind of living your life the way typical teenagers do, being a typical person, just kind of living for yourself. That's kind of what I'm
Yes.
getting.
Oh,
And
yeah.
yeah,
Well drawn.
and if you have a spiritual experience at any time, it can really shape and shake up your entire belief system, your focus in life, all those different things, like what you thought was important. I'm sure you've gone through all those different moments. So let's maybe just lead up to that then. So you just, I didn't know if you had been influenced from a religious or spiritual standpoint.
Well, I didn't really I went to Sunday school for 6 months when I was in primary school. So that was probably my only religious experience with it. Yet, funnily enough, when the experience happened, I automatically went into that mode. I did have other experiences when I was younger that I wasn't aware of. It didn't Most of the learning that I got was in my late 30s. I got most of the learning was because I started to read and I started to research what was going on and what was happening.
Mm.
So when these things were happening to me, I didn't understand what they were and I tended to close down. I am an empath, I am more of an introvert. So I tended to close down and try to go through those sort of feelings and emotions and what was going on. I tried to sort that through myself. And in those days, we didn't have internet. So I would go to the library and I would get books and books and books and try and work out what it was. And it wasn't until I started doing that that I had an understanding of what I experienced, because I did not know what I had experienced, or those experiences that I had. And so I just shut down on them.
So even though you had the experience at 19, it took your 20s and into your 30s to kind of unpack the
Yeah.
significance of what happened and how to actually use maybe the tools and the things that you've learned in order to continue and do the things in your life that are more impactful and those types of things. So it
Yeah.
didn't really hit you right away, but let's dig in. What was it that happened at 19?
So I will go back a little bit too,
Hmm.
because in my teens, I felt like I was rebellious and all the rest, but I didn't get into drugs and I didn't go around stealing things. And so I suppose in the real concept, what I thought was rebellious was I was looking at different spiritual modalities and things like that without really understanding what I was doing. But it wasn't until I was 19 that the situation happened. So I was on holidays 2 states away with my younger sister, 2 states away from home. And I was walking back. She had gone back to the unit before I headed back. And I was walking back to the unit down a very busy road on the Gold Coast. And I got tapped on the shoulder. And as I turned around, I just passed a couple. So I knew that it was probably the couple that was tapping me on the shoulder. And I've turned around and I was punched in the face, king hit. Obviously knocked out without realizing, and I came to being dragged into the back of a car by my hair. And you just sort of a little bit out of whack. You don't know what's going on, and you don't realize, but there's a lot of fear there. You've got the fear straight away because you don't know what's going on. And in the back of this car here, they proceeded. There was 3 of them. They proceeded to. So while this was happening, I was thinking to myself, what can I do to stop these people doing it again to me, again to anybody? Because I couldn't stop them doing it to me. Every time I tried to fight back, there was more bruises, more punching, more hitting, more fear came up. So I stopped fighting back and started to go within and went, how can I stop these people doing it to anyone else? Because that was one of my biggest things. It's like I couldn't do anything here, but how can I change the future? How can I make a difference for somewhere else and in somewhere else? And so in an instant, that was when I had this out of body experience, when I left my body and I was standing outside the car looking in. Now, how it felt was like a beautiful full moon night where it's all got that beautiful blue haze around the place. And I remember looking around thinking it was actually quite pretty in where I was. There was no emotional attachment to, and I call her she or her because I didn't feel like I was attached to that person in the car that was being attacked. You were just sort of and truly, I felt well and truly distant. So when they talk about you're the third person looking in, that's exactly how I felt. I was like watching a movie. And as I'm looking at her, I could see that the energy coming out of the back of her hair. And the energy is like that heat that you see on roads when you see big long roads and you see that energy coming off the road and everything's sort of a little bit wobbly. I could see that coming out of the back of her hair when she'd been pulled into the car. And I'm looking at her and just watching what's going on. And then I could see there was blood down the side of her mouth. And I could see the energy coming out where she'd been punched. But I couldn't taste the blood. I couldn't smell the cigarettes and the alcohol that was in the car. I couldn't feel anything like that. It just didn't, the 5 senses that we have in our physical body were just not there.
Mm.
And yet I was looking. We see, but we weren't attached to that seeing. So I was watching what was going on, and you could see all this energy coming off her where the marks and the bruises were, and it was really quite fascinating. I was quite happy to stand there and just watch because I had no attachment to it. But I don't know how long that was for, Joe. I really don't. As far as thinking back at it, it could have been 5 minutes, it could have been 10 minutes, it could have been 2 seconds. I really don't know how long that was for. And it's like looking at a still photograph. You can look at a still photograph and you can, take yourself into it and work yourself around it and do different things like that. And you can spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, half an hour looking at a painting or a still photograph.
Right.
So I don't know how long I was like that for, but when I think about it, it feels like it was a long time, but I really don't believe it was. So I got the message that I asked for. I asked how I can stop these people doing it to anyone else. And I got the message. It wasn't a big booming voice, and yet it was a message that you couldn't miss. It was, I understand why people say a big booming voice, because it was like that, but it wasn't like that. It didn't sound like a big booming voice, but it felt like a big booming voice.
Okay.
And you would know that because you do music. So you could feel it. You could feel that vibration and you knew what you were doing. And as soon as I got that message, I was back in the body. And as you come back into the body, everything, all those five senses hit you all at once.
Mm.
And it was quite terrifying, considering I would only seconds ago feeling quite relaxed and at ease and all the rest, and then back in the body and you start to feel everything. And that was when, the cigarette smell came back and the alcohol, you could smell it all there, and the pain in the mouth, and all the other areas that were coming through. So that all started coming through. The message I got was, this is where I do question it, Joe, because again, I was only I went to Sunday school in my primary school years for about 6 months.
Okay.
But it must have been enough influence for me to be able to get something out of it, because the first thing I did is I started to pray to them. Now, I would say, I was saying, forgive them, Lord, for they know not what they do. Now, I don't know where I got that one from, but I got that one.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't say it to myself. I said it out loud to them. And I'd say it louder and louder each time I said it. Each time I said it, they would hit me more. They would do something else to stop me, to shut me down.
Mm-hmm.
But I kept on saying it because it felt like it was the right thing to do. That was just what it felt like. Eventually, I stopped because the hand went over the mouth and around the throat, and I passed out. So I did stop. I came to on the side of the road in a gutter, and then struggled to find my way back to my unit, to where I was staying. And so then I went through all that emotional trauma of going through that. But I had this weird thing in the background. So when you spoke to somebody, and one of the things I did say is that I was not going to speak about this attack unless I could find a positive to it.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I didn't do anything. I needed to find a positive. There's no way I was going to share this crappy story, this shitty negative story to anyone unless I could find a positive aspect to it.
Right.
And that's why it took so long before I could find a positive one. So when I never did any counseling or anything like that in those days, you just didn't do that.
Wow.
So I had to deal with it the best way I could, and which is what I did. But I had this very strong disjointed aspect in that, this very weird experience in between it that I couldn't talk about. So I struggled to talk about the attack, struggled even harder to talk about what the hell happened. And it was about almost 12 months to the day after the attack that I had my near-death experience. And I was at work for this one. And again, did not know what had happened, did not know what was going on until 10, 15 years later when I started reading it. But I was at work. Oh, so did you want to ask any questions before I go ahead with that one?
Yeah, I would like to jump in just for a moment. So so that first experience that you had, you're saying that that was like an out of body experience. That wasn't the near death experience.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yes, yes. That's what I call it. Yeah.
right. Okay. And so okay, so in that moment, just a few quick things here.
Yeah.
So you had said that you heard this beaming voice, or booming voice. What did the voice say again? What did it say when you heard the
I didn't,
voice?
I can't tell you what it said. I honestly can't tell you what it said.
Okay. So you just
It's
you felt the presence of a voice that was booming, but you don't know exactly what was being said.
no, not
But you
at all.
but you knew it was outside of your normal reality.
Absolutely, 100%. Because there's no way known if you're being attacked by three people that you're going to sit there and pray to them. Like, that's just not something that's on my radar,
Right, right. And it's not,
especially while it's happening and you're forgiving them while it's happening.
yeah, that's
Like, that's
unbelievable.
stupid.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, from a humanistic standpoint, yes, it does seem like a silly thing to
Yeah,
do, and it's terrible what you went through. It's awful, and you think, how did you go to that place? Well, if you were having somewhat of a spiritual experience, something was influencing you, whether it was your higher self, whether it was you know, a higher energy, something was intervening during it to have you to have the experience you did, but it didn't make them much happier. In fact, it probably made them feel more ridiculous and
yeah.
probably caused it to get to where it went to. But and for you to not get any counseling for that and everything, that's terrible. So I'm sorry to hear that you went through that. That's never, I've heard so many different things, and I know it's years ago now, but it's still
Yeah.
something that's awful for anyone to have to go through. All right. So yeah, you can lead into how this next experience happened. We can talk about this one a little bit later on.
Okay, so almost 12 months to the day that the attack had happened, I was at work and started feeling quite ill. And the last thing I remember, one of the other staff members, she was trying to help me up the stairs, and I obviously was getting heavier and heavier because I was starting to pass out. And all I remember is her saying, "I need some help." And anyway, I don't know what happened after that. Um, and I remember laying there. I was laying there, obviously. I don't remember laying down as in the sense of me being laid down because I obviously had passed out. But I do remember the feeling that everybody was looking over me. So I was laying down and I must have been low on the floor. I don't know. I wasn't high up, I was down low. And then I stood up and thought, why isn't everybody looking at me? So they were still all looking down as I've stood up.
Wow.
And then I've stood up and I've kept on going up. So that was the trigger that I realized that I felt it was a near-death experience. And that's the only trigger I realized. Oh, sorry, there's a bit more of the story, but it was that main thing about why aren't they looking up at me? Why are they looking down? And that
Mhm.
was my sort of my aha moment. Then when I'm in this space and they talk about tunnels and things, I didn't see a tunnel, didn't see anything like that. And it was like foggy, like you would imagine a cloud, sort of foggy, but you knew you were on a path. I couldn't see the path, couldn't see the floor, but you knew you were on the path. You knew you were going the right way. The difference is it's that lovely knowing. It's just, you just know, which,
Mhm.
was really nice. So, you're going along the way. And I watched like on the side there, you had the music. The music is, again, not something that we hear here. There was that
Mhm.
beautiful music. The colors, the closest color I can say is green, but it wasn't your regular green here. It was a really fluorescent, like a light bulb green, if that makes sense. It was a lighter green, not a color of green.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know what that means, but that's sort of that's the only way we can explain it. It's so different.
Was it like a
But
bright turquoise type green? Like a bright,
yeah,
almost like whitish turquoise?
yeah, but it's where you can sort of go, oh, here's the color yellow or here's the color green,
Hmm.
you can say that's what it is, but it it's like it's see-through, but it's there, but
Mm.
it's not there, it's not something, it's the like the vibration of green.
Don't you love having a human body and using human words to express something that you can't express? This is
No.
from talking to a lot of near-death experiences. This is what happens. They start trying to explain it, and sometimes they
Oh,
just stop and they go, "I don't know how to else to explain this." And I
it's
don't think
like
we're
that
meant
booming
to.
voice.
Right.
Yeah, you
Yeah.
just you don't know, because I guess it's the result. So if it was how you would imagine you would hear a booming voice, but you don't hear anything, you don't know anything. I don't hear any words. It's just like that's what you got to do. You do it.
Hmm.
It's just that brilliant knowing. Um, so yes, and I'm going along. No, I know where I'm going. Can't see anything in front of me, but I know where I'm going. I know I'm on the path. And then I see these sort of sparkles or glitter on the side as I'm going along. And there was the darker areas. And I've gone, what are these darker areas? Now, you've got to remember, this is like 100 years ago. We didn't have videos. We didn't have phones. But these little darker images I looked closer at, or these darker squares, and they were like videos of my memories.
Oh, wow.
And again, like if you could imagine hanging up all these little phones as you're walking through and having all your memories on it, that's what it was sort of like.
Hmm.
But again, I couldn't explain that until mobile phones came out. Then I could say, oh, they're like mobile phones.
Right.
So before that, I couldn't explain it. But I'm heading down, I'm looking at things, oh, yeah, they're my memories. Wow, this is really cool. Just again, like I was with the out of body experience, just in my glory, just it feels so good. You're on the right path. You have no past. You're not thinking, oh, I should go back or I should be doing. You're just in the now, going ahead. But I came to what it looked like. How I can only describe it is like a shadow wall. So there's a wall and a gap in between. So it's almost like you would class as gates, no gates, but just like an opening to go through. And I could see these, for want of another word, people behind, and they're all peering in, going, "Oh, she's not supposed to be here." You could hear them without hearing them again. She's
Yeah.
not supposed to be here. She's not supposed to be here. And they were giggling and laughing because they thought it was funny. But
Right.
I couldn't tell you that they were my family, but they were home. They felt like my family. And they felt like, oh, I'm coming back home. And then again, that type of booming voice, without hearing anything, without knowing anything, just feeling that energy. And it was like, oh, not meant to be here, and straight back into my body again.
Wow. Okay. That's
And
fascinating.
um, when I came to, the doctor had given me an adrenaline hit to get everything moving again. I'm still in the bank where I was working, mind you, and I was in. They got me up to the staff room, and they laid me on a banana lounge. And I didn't even know we had that. Imagine having a banana lounge at a bank. We had a banana lounge apparently.
Nice.
And I was on the banana lounge. And anyway, I came to one of the other girls was there, bank had all opened and everything else. And yeah, basically I'd lost body fluids, when because I was right out. Um, and anyway, I sort of went, well, I can't stay at work now. Had a needle and all that sort of stuff. I need to go home. They allowed me to drive myself home after that sort of an experience.
Wow. Yeah,
Things have
people
changed.
people were a lot more hardcore back then, it seems, just oh, you just died.
Yeah,
You've lost all your bodily fluids, now get in your car and drive home. So,
yeah.
yeah, that's quite wild, like because, that wouldn't happen now, I don't think. I think
No,
I
not
just
to
don't
have the doctor intervene and give you an adrenaline hit to bring everything back up and moving again.
and then send you
Um,
home. Yeah, I mean,
then
you'd
say,
usually go to a hospital to figure out what transpired a moment ago, right? So,
yeah, yeah.
wow, that's fascinating. Okay, so
But
just before you continue there, so
yeah,
you were at work, you were working at the
I
time
was
when
at
this
work.
happened, and
Mm.
did you feel something coming on, like something was wrong? Uh,
No, no, that's what
so,
really. I mean, I started to feel sick.
mhm,
I started to feel sick, but I didn't. And what was so weird, it was like in the same week, 12 months later, it was within days of 12 months to the attack. It was
wow,
almost like, well, you've had a taste, here's another one.
mm,
Now start doing something about it, like,
right.
but no, nothing came on. I wasn't sick. I wasn't anything like that.
So, did they ever find out what exactly happened before I dig into any of these questions? Did they find out what
No,
caused the near death?
no, no, nothing. Didn't, but I mean, like a lot of that's my fault. I didn't go to the doctors. I didn't follow up
Right.
because I didn't. I guess my story and everything else is my story and
Hmm.
my what I saw and what I didn't tell anybody else that. I did not know what was happening. It wasn't until after the fact, a couple of years after the fact, that I read a book about near-death experiences. And there was 5 cases in this book. And it was like, oh my God, that was what happened to me. And,
Mm.
like there was bits and pieces out of the different cases that I went, oh, wow. Like you sort of had this bit of an aha moment going, I didn't want to talk about it, wasn't going to say anything to anyone else. I thought I was just weird. But when you hear it from other people and you get these stories and understandings from other people, that's when you start to go, okay, there's a lot more to this than meets the eye, and we need to open up and have a look.
And these things have just blown up. I mean, there's so many people that share these experiences now. It's completely different. I've always questioned that and wondered, how does somebody have an NDE and then not really figure out that it's an NDE till about, some people are like 30 years later. I'm always like, what? How did you not know? And I'm like, did it feel more like a dream? But once I get down that question, it's usually like, no, that wasn't the same as a dream. But there's
Yeah.
almost like this persistence of, I'm not going to talk about it. It could be for a number of reasons. People will think I'm crazy. They're not going to believe my story. I don't want to think about that because it's too outside of my realm here. If I think too much about it, I have trouble living my life normally here. Those types of, those are the kind of answers I
And
get generally.
explaining it, Joe, trying to explain,
But
like we
right.
just went through, how do you explain the color green that's not really the color green?
Right,
Yeah.
right. Yeah, I think out of your experience though, the probably the thing that would have hit me the most is this um this, and it was a great way you described this because I'm a very visual person, and you described it as almost like a glass wall where people were kind of peering in and seeing you and thinking you're not, hey, like you're not supposed to be here, knowing that this was kind of a little trip that you were, just kind of checking things out a little bit. That would have been where I would have focused. I probably would have been like, oh, green. I mean, maybe you're hallucinating, maybe like colors and things like that. I could have maybe come up with some kind of
Yes.
logical reasoning.
Justification.
But these people, one question I would ask you is, and I usually get a little further, into the interview to ask you this question. I'm going to ask right now. If you think about that moment and you think about especially the moment when you had raised up past the body, so they're still there. And that's the other thing, visually, you're describing this just like you'd seen a movie. You've seen there's tons of movies that have depicted this where
Mm,
someone passes away, the soul comes out, and everyone's, oh my God, frantically working on the body, and the
yeah.
soul continues up, and you're just like, oh wow, and then it's like, okay, goodbye. I really don't have any interest in that at all. I'm just going to continue on my way.
Yeah.
And you
Don't
kept
care.
saying, yeah, and you kept saying you were upward on this path that you knew you were going, and there was a knowingness that you already knew. And that is fascinating too. Was it you as Susan that knew, or was it something bigger than you that knew? Because
Definitely something bigger. Because again, I didn't feel like I was. You do feel like you, but you don't feel like you.
Mhm.
It's it's
Like,
it's you're
when
not.
you wake up and go to work, the road to
Yeah,
take to go to work. So that's your knowingness of where you're going. You
yeah.
know that as Susan. You would have known that all the years you worked. Okay, I get up, I have my breakfast, my coffee, I go this way. Did it feel like you in that sense, or was it
I
you?
know. Really, me as my soul,
Hmm.
as that deeper knowing, that inner guidance, that inner knowing, soul knowing.
Did it feel like even more knowingness than you even being here in this reality with me right now?
100%.
That's what I
Yeah,
was feeling just now.
yeah.
So it felt as
When
though,
I'm in this
Mhm.
reality, I'm more of a thinking. When
Mhm.
we're attaching to the soul and to the spiritual side, it's more of a knowing.
Mhm.
And that's how I look at intuition. Intuition is more of that knowing,
Mhm.
that we just know. We don't know how we know, but we just know. And that's that side of it. And that was what it was like. It was like, yeah, I know where I'm going.
I try to stay as positive as possible. I say that in a lot of my episodes, but I'm not gonna mean to this for this to sound negative, but I feel like when we're here, there's times where at least I feel this way, where I don't feel settled. I don't
Yeah.
feel like I can settle down easily. I feel kind of rambunctious, Like it doesn't matter what I'm doing. Like it's like never feels completely settled. Like I'm never completely at ease. The way you're describing it, it sounds like you were completely at ease and knowing exactly where you were going, and that was truly who you
100%.
were.
Yeah,
Does
100%.
that make sense? The way,
Yeah,
and that's why I'm
yeah,
saying, like, even when you're driving to work, but you're also thinking, oh, I gotta get groceries tonight, and I
yeah,
gotta pick up my kid after work, and like you're
yeah,
never settled. Like, but this is just like,
yes.
okay, off I go. It's like,
And
okay,
I and
yeah.
and I think that's that living in the now moment, Joe,
Mm,
when they talk about living in the now. That's how I felt. It was like there was no past, there was no future apart from what I could see in front of me. It was just I was just living in the now. I was just right in the now. And and it was like, whew, this is pretty cool.
wow.
It just felt it didn't actually it didn't feel good, didn't feel bad, didn't feel left, didn't feel right. It was just there. It was just whole.
I think that's why I use the word at ease. Like,
Yeah.
at ease doesn't really mean great. It just means um complete or something. I'm
Mm.
trying to use the right word too, but I'm understanding
Yeah.
what you mean. So interesting. And I think that, you talk about getting the noun. This is why, I continuously am told by most of the guests I have is that the closest we can get to that place is through meditation or
Yeah.
through finding those things in life that give us a taste of meditation. I find it through my music more than anything.
Oh,
I'm on a learning journey myself to try to be able to do this without needing the music because it is a little bit of a different type of thing with music. It's the creative side is still, the brain is still going and there's things happening, but I do tap into during music. I feel like I tap
you
into
would
this other
do.
place.
Anything creative, you will tap in and yeah. And what I call that is like an active meditation where your brain's active and then it allows those intuitive messages and that information to come through.
Okay. So you probably encourage that with people too who have maybe because I have a very active mind. And if you have
Mm.
trouble getting to that place, I do believe though, and I'm just in the last week, I did a very calming meditative yoga type moment, 20 minutes for the first time in my life. And
Yeah.
I felt at ease in a sense after, and I went, okay, it's not that I can't do it, it's that I need to find the time to do it. And I think that's just an important message to put across because I love music. So it's very easy for me to grab music, to get into music and be there. But sometimes it does
Yeah.
take a little bit of work as well until you form a habit. So
Yeah.
for me, I just feel like that's what I need to do. This is just me personally. I'm not talking to the audience out there, Soul Inspired, but I just feel sometimes we make excuses and it's good to make sure that we are following through because it can be a really good thing to get to that place. When you came out of that moment, you said it took a few years for you to kind of come to terms with what happened. It didn't change your life you view right away, or did it?
It changed in a lot of ways because I knew that there was something else. I knew that there was something else. Um, and having that feeling, that sense of when you do an out of body or when you do a near death experience, having that sense, it's like it. I know that there's something else there. I don't know what it is. I don't know how to get to that. I don't know what it means, but I know that there's something else there. And it was as I was going through my marriage and it was starting to dissolve and I was starting to have all sorts of problems there. That's when I realized that I needed to learn. I needed to get an understanding. So I went in with the intention of trying to save my marriage. But while I was getting the books, because we'd go into town like once a month or something, and I'd do my grocery shopping, and I'd go to the library and I'd grab as many books as I could. So then I'd have a month to read those books, and you could grab about 10 books. So I started to learn about a lot of self-development stuff. I started to learn about, relationships, and I started to learn about finance because I actually like finance too. I like the analytical side of things, so I like that aspect. And as I'm reading these books and getting these understandings, I'm a theory tester. So I would test the theories. And
Mm.
this is one of the things I say when I'm talking on my show or when I'm talking to other people. Don't feel that you have to stick with one thing. If music is your thing, Joe, you can do music. But there may be other things that you can resonate with that you may not be aware of. But you've got to test them. So I
Mhm.
would get these books and I would test the theories because they were personal development, so they were all learning ones. One of them was called the Dance of Anger, and I've forgotten who the author is, but I started to practice that. I tested that theory. That was really good. That helped me in my relationship. Another one I practiced was visualization. So that was one of the first ones I read, and I got $85,000 out of that one. So that was pretty good,
Nice.
practicing that one. Um, and another one was, like I said, I read about the near-death experiences, and I read about astral travel. Now I started to put these together because I had had this out-of-body experience during the attack. I'd had this, what I realized was a near-death experience at work, and so I started to test the theory on astral traveling. If we can leave our bodies, which I knew we had, I'd done it twice already, can we do it deliberately? And so I practiced astral traveling and I succeeded.
Wow.
It was very
Okay.
short, very sweet, and I've never done it again. But you know, when you're doing it, it's very different.
So you've achieved it one time?
Yeah, yeah. I'm a theory tester. I only need to test it once. Don't need to keep going there.
Right. Okay, I see what you mean. So, you know what? I think I can relate to that a little bit. I'm gonna relate to something similar to what you just said with the booming voice as well. I've talked about this before in an episode, so hopefully my listeners aren't sick of my stories. But there was a moment in my life, and it would have been my early 20s, maybe late teen, maybe 19, 20. And I was really questioning a lot of things, and I was going to bed that night and I was really fed up with not knowing the answers to our existence. I thought, what are we really just dust? Like what is this? And I said, whatever cost, except death. I don't want to die. I need some kind of proof tonight or soon that there's something else going on here. And I went to sleep. And around 3 or 4 in the morning, I woke up to the loudest roaring, booming voice within me. And it sounded like
Mm,
my name, like Joe, like it sounded very loud. I don't know what it was saying. I couldn't make out the words, but it woke me up and I couldn't even hear anything around me. It was so loud internally that I couldn't calm down. Well, as soon as, and I was fine at first, but the moment I came kind of aware of what was happening, fear hit me
yes,
because I didn't know what this thing was. And I started shaking and like a little, like, I mean, I grabbed onto my girlfriend and oh my God, I'm holding on to her. And she's like, what are you doing? And I'm like, oh my God, what's happening? And like, I could, and and that happened to me. And, I remember the next day I thought, was that a dream? And immediately it felt like, no, that was not a dream.
no,
And
mm,
then I thought, so that relates to the booming feeling that you had, but you see, you were on the other side of it, so you didn't get the fear. See, I was stuck here. I was like in between or something, and I couldn't make sense of it, but I tested the theory.
yeah. Good on
I
you.
succeeded, and I've never asked for that experience again because it didn't
Yeah.
feel like something I want to have. And that's fine. It's I'm not scared of it because I think it has to do with my at the very moment I experienced it from this place, I was scared of it because it was outside of my reality. It didn't
Yes. Yeah.
make sense. And to me, when you hear a big, loud vocal, booming voice, it's a scary feeling. Like, so I thought it
Mm,
was demonic or something. Um, I've come to terms with that I don't believe it had any kind of negative feeling because I asked for it. I
yes.
I wanted that before I went off to sleep.
And
And
that's
it's
what I
here
did
you
during
go.
the attack. I asked for it. Yeah.
Right.
I asked for help and you
Yeah.
got it. And that's one
Wow.
of the things I say about intuition. If you want to get the answers, you have to ask because we all have free will. And if we don't ask, we're not open to receiving.
Wow. And so you did that
And so,
astral travel and you had that moment and you learned
yep,
about how important it was to ask. You, from what I understand, you do this life coaching through the intuitive nature company that you run. Do
yep,
you, if you're helping people and you're helping them, I, this word manifest, sometimes it gets a good rap and bad rap. So I'm trying to be careful how I use it, but because we
Yeah,
want to manifest the good things in life and we want
absolutely.
to bring the good things to us in life.
Yeah.
Is it as simple as asking, or what kind of thing what would you coach someone who's saying, hey, listen, I'm looking to find a better relationship or more money or these types of things? What kind of advice would you give them? Because
Well, with manifestation, if we're doing manifestation on its own, I've got a little online course for that. But to do manifestation on its own, that was what I did and got the $85,000. That's what was my practice for manifestation. So you can do this as a very analytical way of doing manifestation. So I wanted to test this theory because and I wanted it to be something realistic, not, oh, I want to be happy. I want to be, it's not, I
Mhm.
wanted it something that I can really ground. And so it's got to be something. So I started to practice. And what I wanted was the farmhouse to be repainted and redone. We couldn't afford to do it ourselves. So I wanted to renovate the farmhouse. We were on a 90-acre organic crop farm and farming it. So I didn't have time to do a lot there when I was working. So my manifestation little role was to go into each room, and I tried to do this every day. I'd go into each room and I would picture how I wanted that room to look. I would like we didn't have wardrobes. I would like some built-in wardrobes there. I'd like this. The girls' room, they wanted pink, so we'd have pink curtains. And, I'd go through each room and I'd do this sort of every day if I could. But it wasn't just about asking, it was about imagining it, about feeling it. It was everything. So we had to go through those, all the physical, the emotional, the spiritual, everything about it to make sure you manifest what it is you want.
Hmm.
So I would be doing this every day, and it only takes a couple of minutes, you just go from room to room. And I got to the stage where probably about 3 or 4 months down the track, it was every couple of days, I wasn't doing this much. Then I went into the local hardware store and I'd start to pick out laminate colors or paint colors, really starting to get involved in, like, it's already happening. I've got to pick the colors now. What do I want? How do I want it? So I really got into that type of manifestation. It wasn't just a let's think about it, let's ask. It's about living it.
Hmm.
And so I did that. And on December the 4th in 1989, on December the 4th, this storm went through and took our roof off. And we had what they call blue ribbon cover, so old for new cover. And anyway, we had the police come around, the SES, everything else to come around to tarp everything up and all the rest. I remember when this storm was happening, I grabbed the kids and went into cyclone mode because we have cyclones here in Queensland, which is like your hurricanes
Mhm.
in the States. And so I grabbed the kids and I put them in this safe space. I put mattresses around, dog, cat, bird, everything all went into this safe space. I watched the windows in the kitchens bowing. And as we've gone through the kitchen, you looked up and saw the manhole and there was like sky, no roof.
Wow.
Ran into the bedroom. I watched the whole window get sucked out of the bedroom in one of the bedrooms, and it didn't break until it hit the floor, hit the ground. But we were slightly raised. It was an old wooden farmhouse, and the wind was coming in under the house and lifting the carpet. So while I'm trying to walk, it was like walking on a bouncing castle, trying to
Wow.
get things for the kids and get them all into a safe space. What was really interesting, when the guys came to put the roof on, they found a little picture of Mother Mary right above this little black and white one that obviously wasn't for me, right above where I put the kids. It was completely above where the kids were, where they were in that safe space. So that was really quite sort of random.
Yeah.
But when the builders came, they sort of, I said to them, how long is this going to take? So we got caravans in because we needed to work the farm still. So we got caravans in to stay in, and so we could stay on the farm. And he goes, oh, it takes a little while because everyone has to pick their colours and pick their laminate and everything else when we're rebuilding the kitchens in the house. Well, I sort of felt a bit guilty because I've already done that. I
Right.
had all the colours, I had everything there. He couldn't
Wow.
believe it. I said, oh, no, I've sort of got them. It's almost like I did it myself
Oh my
deliberately.
goodness. Right. Wow.
So, yeah, 85,000. It was just short of a complete wipeout, but $85,000 worth of interior. And that was back in the 80s, late 80s. So
Mhm.
yeah, quite a bit of money spent on that.
That's fascinating. I mean, and obviously we don't all want to manifest a storm to come in and cause us to have to organize our house, but it
Yeah,
shows you, you know what that represents though? It really does speak to the idea, when I hear these professionals talking about manifestation, and I've done some of the same things with my music and things like that. I understand that it works and exists because I've done it, but you don't always know how it's going to happen. That's the
yes.
thing. So you can feel it,
That
see it,
you've
and
got to
all these things.
separate from that.
That's
Yeah.
right. And I
You've got
think
to
as long,
separate.
yeah, and put a good intention under it. And obviously, no one wants to get hurt in the interim in order to achieve these things or get these things. So you want it to be a
Yeah.
positive experience.
Yeah.
Obviously, you guys were all okay, so that's good. But yeah, it is an interesting way that it came about in your life because wow,
I
that's
was hoping it was
that's
going to be
wild.
more like a Cats Lotto win. That was
Right,
my,
right. Yeah, it's like, wow, it
my
came in with a
intention.
storm. Um, wow, that's
Especially
really
when I
interesting.
mean, I didn't know we had, you know, cover for insurance cover like that. Like, you just don't know that.
Mhm.
So it was more about what I wanted, not about how I was going to get there.
When you had both of these experiences, so you had the out of body experience younger, and then you had I would say it was a near death experience because it actually it fits a lot of especially when you said you were seeing uh parts of your life, you're having like a bit
Yeah.
of a review or almost like a visual of the things that happen in your life.
Yeah.
So after that, you obviously had some time that you worked through work and these types of things. How long did it take until you got into the work you do now? Were you influenced immediately from a spiritual place and you all of a sudden just seen the light and thought, oh my goodness, I'm gonna, did it all come together right away or did it take a while?
Oh no, it took a while. I didn't have that aha moment like that. I had lots of little ones. So
Mhm.
um we're living in the here and now, we're living in the physical. So excuse me. What I did notice that in some of the groups that you were with or the people that you knew, you started talking about your spiritual your things, they could go so off tangent, so woo woo that it can be frightening or it can be a little bit, it's just over the top. Um, we had some people here in Australia that they were dressing as Native American Indians because they believed that they were Native American Indians in their past life. So they would dress the part and do everything like that. Now, fine, you do that, you be you. But my analytical brain, and this is where I go, is like you have been brought back onto this earth as an Australian in this environment.
Mhm.
Why are you living in a past life? Why are you doing that? Yes, I get that you've got connections there, and that's lovely, but you're not supposed to be in this life now and living
Mhm.
something that you had in the past.
Right.
So why it took me a bit longer than what some people will take is because of my analytical side.
Mhm.
Everything has to make sense to me, and that's why I'm a theory tester. If
Right.
it doesn't make sense, I've got to let it go. I don't disbelieve it, but I don't believe it. I've just got to let it sit, and then yeah, it's like the experiences I had. They didn't make sense until I read about somebody else having them, and that's when they made sense. And then, oh, okay, now I know what's coming.
And this is why, and I like that. I like how you do test things. It's the same sense where if I have an interview with someone who had agnostic or atheist viewpoints before their experience and they come back and they have a completely different mindset, I'm really interested in those ones sometimes because I'm not completely against atheist people. I have friends who have an atheist views. Sometimes it's a little difficult to have the same kind of conversations if we have completely different ideologies and belief systems. But that's
Yeah,
part of life, the part of being human. But what I do like about it is they want proof. They want some type of proof, and unless they have it, they so when I talk to someone who's been that way and had their proof and then they come back and they want to speak about about their experience, then I am fascinated by that because I go,
Yeah.
okay. And it's not that I'm against the person who was a hippie living by a tree and playing music all day, because that's kind of who I am. I'm a musician. And I've had a belief system since I was a kid. I'm an empath since I was a child. I feel things, I feel people's energies, I know it. But for me to go have an experience and explain it, I might I might get to some people, but when someone's really from the other side of it or very analytical or
Yeah.
needing those like yourself, you needing almost to test things until it's proven, it it's just there's a little more merit behind it. Not to take away from anyone else I've spoke with. It just feels a little more like I'm interested in that personally.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I don't know if
And
that makes
that's
sense.
why it took me. Yeah. And look, I don't necessarily have to have proof, but I have to make it, it has to feel right. It has to make sense.
Hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have to see a God, or I don't have to see like the booming voice. Like, that doesn't make sense until I read somebody else's experienced it and went, okay, I get that we don't have to know it all, and we don't have to have it all the understanding behind it. We just need to be open-minded about it, and we need to assess it that suits us. What
Hmm.
resonates with me won't necessarily resonate with another person, or with others. But there's all those paths and directions that all go to the same place. That's about
Right.
actually within.
Absolutely. And so when did you start Intuitive Nature, and how do people contact you if they're interested in the stuff the work that you do?
They can get on the website, so intuitivenature.com.au. So it's an Australian business. I've got a lot of free resources. There's one there. It's a quiz. What is your strongest intuitive nature? So when we receive our intuitive messages, do you receive them stronger as a physical, as a mental, as emotional, or as a spiritual? So we receive messages in different ways. And when you know what your strongest one is, it allows you to be more aware that, if I'm going to get messages, I'm more likely to get it this way. Yours would probably be more the visual side of it. So,
Mhm.
you're getting it in different ways. So there's a free resource on there. But what happened with me is I decided at the ripe old age of 48 to go back to uni and do a full-time uni degree. So I did this degree, public health degree, and within 6 months of me finishing the degree, the government changed hands and wiped out all the jobs. So I've never been able to use that degree in the context that I learnt it for. Still owe the money, but couldn't do that. And I
Mm.
thought to myself, I've got to do something with this information. Everything lined up, all the ducks lined up for me to go to university. I was meant to be there. I know that.
Mm.
But when it all sort of falls out, when you're finished and it all collapses, you sort of go, well, what the hell? Why was I meant to be doing that?
Right. Right.
So I started to put the other things in together, and this is when I started Intuitive Nature, and I started doing the flower. I started getting the downloads, actually, what I call downloads for the flower readings. So that's my tool of my trade. I do flower readings. That's why there's flowers all over the place. Um, and for me to do the flower readings, again, my analytical brain had to kick in. So I had to look at flower readings in an analytical way, but in a way that allows your intuition or your psyche or whatever you want to call it to come through and be able to deliver messages as well. So how we do the flower readings is you choose it, you choose a flower, what you like, and it can be a flower image. We've brought it all the way into the new age. So we've now got flower images from Google, and we can Google them. And what we do is we look at, say, if it's a landscape image that you've chosen, if it's a portrait image you've chosen, they mean two different things. And that's about your motivation to achieve the goal, because the flowers are your goals. So if you've got a
Okay.
landscape, it's of a negative connotation. It could be group, family, or community, which means that the wheels have got to be wobbly before you are motivated to do something.
Mm.
If it's a portrait image, it's more about the positive aspect. And it means that you don't make any decisions unless it feels really good for you. Doesn't matter about anyone else, as long as it feels good for you. So
Right.
we start to look at that, and that the stem is your path or journey to get to your goal. The leaves are your guides along the way. Your petals are of attraction. So what you put out, you receive back, like attracts like. And we go through and do this analytical reading. But as we're doing that analytical reading, you're actually bringing all this other information through. So you really connect with people.
Wow, that's
Mhm.
fascinating. I've never heard of this before. That's really fascinating. And if you're choosing, you're using, it's funny, someone might listen to that and say, well, what, we're picking a flower, like what's going on? But then I thought to myself, but it's kind of the same sense where everything happens for a reason. There's
Yeah,
no mistakes, right? In life, there's no wrong turns in the same sense where if you're picking a flower, you were meant to pick that flower and it's supposed to mean something
exactly.
to you.
Yep.
So that I
Yep.
can see, and obviously based on your experiences you've had, you know this to be true. You have a knowingness of you that that is the way the universe works, or whatever we are. There's kind of a knowing of something, right? So that's why it probably
Yep.
makes sense to you. So that's fascinating. I did wonder about all the flowers. I just thought maybe you like flowers. I didn't know what was happening at first, but that makes perfect sense. So that's really a neat way to go about things. And that's through intuitive nature. People can contact you that way
Yep.
and work one-on-one with you in groups. Is that
Yeah, the one-on-one, if it's online, we can do that. I do group workshops. That's when they paint their flower and we do a reading about it. So you can imagine their intuition has to really get connected to that. And
wow,
then we do a reading on it. So we can do those workshops. But there's also the online courses there as well.
that's really neat. You've had the experiences that you went through. Most of the I would say almost every podcast I've done at this point, every episode I've done, I've always kind of ended it with asking a question. And it always comes down to, I think I'm starting to see a pattern with it. I just want to say it like that
Okay.
first. So the question that
Yeah.
I always ask everyone at the end of each episode is, if you just right away, what comes to you intuitively, right from your heart, to answer the question of why are we here? What was our purpose of incarnating?
My purpose was for learning. Is that what you mean? As far as I'm
In a
concerned, we
general
came
sense,
to
from a
learn.
human, why does a human incarnate on in any planet? What is our, why don't we just stay there if it's is
Oh, we
at
can't
ease with
stay
this?
there. You can't stay there because the spirit doesn't have a connection to the five physical senses. We, as a spirit, we have to be incarnated to experience the five senses,
Okay.
to experience taste and touch, all those sort of things. So we have to be in that physical body to learn about those things, to learn about those understandings. One of the things that I really, with my with the attack, what I really got the understanding was that we are not actually emotionally attached. Emotions are energy that we are expressing as a physical body. It's feelings that the spirit has. Spirit has feelings, bodies have that physical emotions. They express it. It's energy emotion.
Mm,
So we're not connected in that way. So for the spirit to get an understanding, we have to be incarnated. We have to come in here to get
right.
that understanding, to get that learning.
Okay. And when I take that deeper, I mean, I'm a very firm believer that we're not the only existence out there, that the earth plane is just one place. It could be one realm, one dimension, and I think there's other
Yeah,
planets, other species, and they probably have different senses. Who knows? But our senses, we have these five senses that we handle. What you're saying is we come here to experience the physical, basically, the physical experience. So
yeah, yeah,
um, so that's a great answer. I mean, you're right. If we don't, I'm sure we can do it in a different way over there, but it's not the same, right?
exactly.
We
Yeah,
know that we can have that, but it's like because everything is just instant over there, there's no challenge in it. There's no, someone said to me, I wanted to feel what it felt like to go in water. So I came here to go in water.
yeah,
I really wanted that. And I was like, okay, that's because over there, it's like, you don't have to think that. You just, you have to come here to experience it. So it's really around
yeah.
experiences too, the experiences of the
Yeah,
senses.
yeah, 100%. And it's
Interesting.
like if you could imagine a CEO of a company and they've decided that they needed to hire plumbers to do something, and that CEO doesn't understand what the plumber's doing until that CEO or that spirit comes down and has a look at what the plumber's doing and experiences that, they will not know. So for
Mm,
spirit to help us, they've got to be able to have been in the body and get that understanding so we can then get those learnings as well.
I understand. Okay, that's great. And I would, and of course we none of us know all the true answers to everything, but I would when we talk about that, I would speculate too that the spirit or soul has growth, and by incarnating, we come down and continue to grow. So, I
Absolutely.
mean, that's probably why you
Yeah.
hear things of angels and spirit guides, and maybe people are taking a break for a while from incarnating because it's not the easiest journey, as we all know, but this has been really, really fascinating. I want to thank you so much for being on today. This has been a great talk. I never know which direction we're going. I always say that at the end of my episodes, and I'm glad I don't dig in too much because I get to learn like the audience learns, each individual and each soul that comes on and talks about their experiences. So thank you so much for coming
Oh,
on.
thank you for having me on. It's been fantastic. And I do love it. I love that it's allowed to flow because there's whatever I'm saying, there'll be things that you're interested in. And if you're interested in, your listeners are interested in it as well.
Absolutely. I look at
Yeah.
it like there's like, thought bubbles and all the people listening, and they're all thinking these things. It's too bad they can't come on and ask a question. I've always said maybe at some point I'll start doing a once a month. I don't want to put this out there because I don't know if how I do it, but almost like a live interview, right? That'd be kind of interesting
Yeah.
because then people could get more involved and ask questions. It'd be really interesting. So just the last thing before I let you go too is that you did mention you did have a podcast, or are you podcasting or doing any kind of work with that
I,
any longer?
I've got it. I've had one. Things got a little bit hectic late last year, so I've put it on pause. So obviously, they're still getting lots of downloads and everything else. It's called the Voice of Intuition Show. It's on video as well. I am looking at re-kicking off season two, I'm going to call it. Season two, I'm looking at starting it up again. It'll be shorter, but I'm instead of having interviews, I'm thinking of just going a little bit more like tips, learnings. I like
Yeah.
doing that. I like people to get an understanding of it, and I'd like them to experience. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Apparently, I've never tried, but there is more than one way to skin a cat. I'd like them to get an understanding of how they can connect with their
Mm.
spirit, with their soul, with their intuition a little bit more. And there's lots of different ways that you can do that. And I'd love to be able to give those tips forward. But yeah, at the moment it's still running, it's still
Hmm.
there, but I
Hmm.
haven't been hitting you up since late last year.
Well, I'll definitely get all the information from you, put it in the show notes, and so that people can follow along and see your journey as well, if as you go into a possible season two. And if not, they can go back and look at all the past episodes that you've done. So I really appreciate
Yes,
that. I like to turn to the camera and say, thank you so much for everybody who's been subscribing. Yeah, I'm continued to be amazed by the amount of people following so quickly. So please like, share, and subscribe. And until next time, I'll see you on the Soul Inspired. Thank you so much, Susan, for being on tonight.
thank you.
So is so